Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and welcome to a lady coming in from Columbus. How do we say it, Ruth?
I say OH.
And I say IO.
Very good. Right, Columbus, Ohio. That took, by the way, everyone, that took him a minute to get.
Yeah, it did. And we've actually been talking for 15 minutes before we pressed record, just so we could rehearse that.
15 minutes to rehearse that.
Ruth Milligan, welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. It's great to have you on.
Darren, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about our conversation.
It's looking forward to this. So you've been in the industry of helping organizations improve their, I was going to say improve their speech, but that's not quite right. Improving their ability to articulate a message. You're a coach, executive speech coach, trainer, and you run an organization called Articulation. But you've also been in sales for many, many years, because you were sharing before that your business has been around for a number of years. And I think you mentioned the word 23 years. So love to delve into all things. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about sales, but from the perspective of articulating a message, and particularly when it comes to pitching a proposal. But there's probably a whole lot of other things that I'm gonna ask you, because we don't know where these interviews go. If people are listening to this and you've listened,
I'm all for the improv.
Yes,
bring it on. Yes.
This is the fireside chat, even though there's no fire anywhere here. Ruth, for the audience's benefit, I'd love to get a little bit of background from you in terms of what was the background, and specifically what led you to do what you do today, working with organizations. And I know you've also been responsible for looking after the TEDx. It's not a franchise, it's a TEDx component in Columbus.
TEDx Columbus. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about I start there? Because it's actually the way I tell the story, if I may.
Please.
I always love to lead with the story, as the title of the book says right behind me. So it was a really dark and wintry, rainy night in February of 2009. And my husband and I had come home from a date night. My children were like 3 and 5-ish at the time. And the babysitter had put them to sleep, which was a miracle, right? That never happens. And I said, honey, let's watch a TED Talk. We had never watched one before.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, what's that? So I crack open my laptop. We snuggle into bed. The rain is, it's thunder and lightning and whatnot. And I hit play, and it's Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Love, Pray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she's an author, and, she's kind of in this feminist self-help. It's a genre, right? And she's giving an amazing talk. And I hear this loud roaring noise next to me, thinking it's the thunder outside, but it's my husband fast asleep. Snoring his ass off. True story. And I was like, well, shit, this isn't going to work. So can I curse? Was that
Yeah, you can. Yeah, absolutely.
So I start clicking through the TED site, as one does in the early days, of like, oh my gosh, what else? Now, the timeline, just so everyone knows, Facebook sort of came online in 2008. So this was beginning of 2009, and they started feeding their content through social. They had put their talks online in 2006 when Chris Anderson bought the franchise from Richard Saul Warman, who founded it. And they started sharing this content, right? So I click through the site back to this night, and I find this tiny little blog post deep inside their site. And it's like a paragraph, and it says, if you want to host a TEDx event, click here. This is what it is. It's a franchise, but you don't pay us. We don't pay you. You have to meet like 4 criteria.
Yeah.
There's more than that. And put in your application here. And that night, it happened to be the day after they posted this paragraph. They had been online for 24 hours.
Wow.
And I realized at the time that I had been a little bored in my PR and marketing practice, and this could be like a fun change up. So I clicked the button and clicked and clicked and clicked. And by 2 a.m., I had envisioned that I was going to host the first TEDx Columbus. What I didn't know was that 6 months later, on the stage that I envisioned, I would host 8 speakers for the first TEDx Columbus, but we were the 35th event in the world.
Wow.
For context, there's been about 50,000 events since 2009. So we were what you might call an early adopter. And on my stage, I had John Glenn, the astronaut. I had the chair of the School of Architecture. I had a scientist from this big contract research organization. And I was like, oh my God, that was unbelievably fun. I had no business doing it. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I begged everyone to show up. 300 seats I sold out, 8 people on stage. And then I kept like replaying in my head over and over again what some of them did to really crush their talks and what a few people did to like kind of dial it in.
Yeah.
And I won't tell you which ones were which. And so I went to look for somebody. We immediately said, we're going to do this again. I went to look for somebody to help me, and I couldn't find anybody. Because in the spectrum of communication coaching, on one end, you have media training, which is you already know what your message is and you're just repeating it.
Yeah.
And on the other end is speech writing, which is I know one person really well, and I'm going to generate a talk for them for a specific event. Well, I had been a speechwriter in politics for the first 6 years of my career. I had done media training for clients as a crisis communications consultant and a media trainer and a press secretary. I had done all of that. And I was like, those, no, that doesn't feel quite right. So I spent a year in 2010 teaching myself the essentially the fundamentals of structured thinking, storytelling. How do you organize 100 pounds and put it into a 10-pound bag and produce TED-like talks?
Mm-hmm.
And so we kept doing it. But it was also that time, and I was like, why aren't I doing more of this? So I gave up my PR and marketing practice only to do coaching and training inside public speaking and verbal communications, which is still what I'm doing 15 years later and what brings me to you today. So that's
Wow.
the origin of this phase of my career. And I have done all those other things. And coincidentally, in college, I was also a speech comm major. So I'm like one of the like 10 people in the universe that is actually working inside, inside the major they went to school, and I fell into it because I couldn't get into the business school, which is actually funny because I never took a business course ever,
Yes.
but I've run a business for 23 years. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of one of those scrappy entrepreneurs that kind of figures it out.
But the fact you're doing it, 15 years later, and who
Well,
would have thought?
23 because
Well,
I had
when you
eight
consider
years of
that,
right, I had 8 years of doing business general consulting
yeah.
before I decided. And of course, you know what I did? I changed my market.
Mm,
All my targets. I used to work with marketing and communications people, and then I'm working with HR and talent people of which I knew no one.
mm.
So it was like starting way over.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you look back, can you remember what might have prompted you coming back from that date night where it was bucketing down rain before your husband started
Snoring,
swearing?
yeah, the whole thing.
I
I'm not
mean,
making
what?
it up.
But what prompted you to all of a sudden have a look at a TED Talk? Because at that time you think, maybe I'll read a good book, or maybe turn on cable TV.
Well, I think because Facebook was new and I'm just been a curious person.
Hmm.
And I knew about Elizabeth Gilbert's book. I hadn't read it. And I thought, oh, this looks like something I might be interested in. But there was something else that I didn't share, which was I grew up in a household with a father who was a lawyer and a litigator and a legislator.
Hmm.
And we talked about issues every day at dinner. He dragged me to so many Rotary Club meetings and big lectures. And, he was on boards of trustees, and I'd have to go listen to somebody talk. And
Yeah.
but that was how he would sit in NPR, which is our big public
Mm.
radio, um, was founded when I was about 4, I think, and he would sit in the driveway and listen to the NPR stories because he didn't want to leave the car because we didn't have
Yeah.
a radio inside. So I was in it. I grew up in an environment where there was a lot of idea sharing, a lot of conversation, a lot of articulating things. And he was also a writer. He would write
Mm.
us memos about things. He would say, "To Ruth from Dad." So I think when I look back now, it was an extension of a lot of that. And he belonged to an essay club that I
Hmm.
wasn't allowed to come to except one time a year because it was only for men. And I was always like, "Where's my Kit Kat?" It was called Kit Kat.
Okay.
And I'd say, where's my Kit Kat, where I get to hang out with cool peers and exchange really fun ideas. And TEDx became that for me.
Yeah. Okay.
When I put all of that together, it kind of made perfect sense. In the moment,
Mm.
but when I would like pull that thread of like, where is my, because he'd go once a month and listen to these really cool papers that people would write on really esoteric topics. And I was like, that sounds like, kind of nerdy, but fun. So hopefully that, but he was not a business person. He was a thinker and a writer and a lawyer, and he left the family business to, you know, be a prosecutor. So I didn't have any exposure to business growing up.
No, but I guess through watching and observing and listening to your father, because litigators, particularly in a courtroom, what do they have to do? They have to be persuasive, they have to be influential, they have to have the ability to tell a story that at least sounds plausible, based on the facts or the evidence that they have to try and
Yep.
convince a jury or a judge that I guess their method or their story is the one that's most believable. So that is a skill set.
Lots of skill sets. And my father was a man of actually few words. He wasn't quiet, but he every word mattered to him.
Yes. Yes.
And I saw him be thoughtful and contemplative about everything he did, and it completely rubbed off. And we treat our clients with the same sort of care
Mm.
and compassion that he might have. And so he definitely lives on.
So when you think about that, because often when people think about speaking, they think about, things like TEDx and public speeches or doing keynotes, running conferences, things like that. Is the work that you do not just that sort of component, but also how do we improve communication within teams and across business units within an organization, rather than just being able
Oh yeah.
to speak, right? It's communication, effective communication.
So the first is the practice that I run is specifically, watch me trip up my words, is specifically for people who are not paid speakers. This is the leader, the rising leader, the person in succession, the person who got appointed to that
Yeah.
top level job, was a subject matter expert, a sales leader, but kind of missed our class along the
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
Or people who are put into unusual circumstances for their skill set for a moment. Hey, let's go talk to that cancer congress in front of 1,000 people, or maybe it's the TEDx talk because they invented something.
Yeah.
It could be a scientist talking to a group of donors at the university. We spend a lot of time in that space where people are pitching
Yeah.
investment in philanthropy, investment in startups, a ton of that. So we do a lot of teams work. We use some tools to work to assist with us on that, and we can go deep into that space. But we believe that everyone has different needs at work, and their communication style is a reflection of that. But sometimes communication problems are really behavior or really symptoms
Mm.
of people who are unhappy at work or in the wrong jobs.
Yeah.
And we've come to that a little bit the hard way by trying to solve some team communication issues or individual interpersonal communication issues and realize this just isn't the right job for you. We can talk about that for an hour.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
many stories where people have habits that are shading the real issue.
Well, I was gonna ask you about that concept, the shaded habit, and that was gonna be a catalyst for you to just go off on a different tangent altogether. But you
Yes.
pick- you made a really interesting point there, and that is around different communication styles and I guess different people have different frames of reference and different ways to communicate because they have different ways to think and different ways to process information. So in the work that I do, one of the biggest things that I've got to try and help sales teams in particular and sales leaders in particular is to understand that they'll have their own frame of reference and that's their natural default that they like to communicate with and through. But they have to start to recognize that not everybody's going to have the same frame of reference or use the same filters. So be conscious of that and be aware of that and understand that somebody might like a lot of detail where you don't. So if you're trying to
Correct.
communicate to people like that, you can't just use your own standard frame of reference and give them all big, ambitious and ambiguous type concepts because a person who likes detail is going to be sitting there thinking, this is rubbish. You got no detail. This is all fluff. You're a politician, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
And also there's two other kind of really interesting variables on that. I coached a sales leader recently who failed in a quarterly briefing. And the CEO sent him to me and said, figure this out. The client was agitated
Hmm.
at him in this quarterly briefing. And he didn't come up through sales, but he had sort of made his way over there and was assigned this big account.
Mm.
And we practiced a few different things. And one of them, believe it or not, was shutting up.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize that this person just was always agitated and he just wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
And my client would keep bringing him data and more information and charts and graphs, and he wanted nothing of it. And I told him I can't use his name. I'll just call him Lee.
Yeah.
I said, Lee, just shut up and listen. And he came back and he said, "Oh my God, that was all I needed to hear." Sometimes it's the simplest thing. I'll give you one other really quick example in this category. We tell people all the time to make their audience the central character of your story, which is the sales, right? Sales 101.
Yeah.
Make what I'm saying. And I have to spend so much time teaching people. They understand all the strategy terms, but I want to hear it through the lens of Mrs. Jones.
Yeah.
The woman who lives with the issues you're facing, and it's so much faster and
Yes.
easier, and the bridge is so much more accessible to visuals and emotion and stimuli that, oh, I get it. I feel like I'm Mrs. Jones. Duh. Okay, let's go on. So we get really stuck in like corporate speak and strategy speak that nobody cares about. Nobody can connect with. So
Isn't that interesting? I was actually, as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I ran a half day workshop for one of my clients on Monday, and it was around helping them improve their communication within the team and across their business. And they're a global organization, but predominantly based in Australia. And one of the things I did talk to them about and share with them is taking this concept of the complex and making it simple. So saying, hey, you guys have corporate speak, you have certain lingo, you have certain acronyms, you have certain all this different stuff. But if you think about this, and I literally said, if you could talk to a 5-year-old child and have that 5-year-old
correct.
child understand, you are a master communicator.
Correct.
And yet we overcomplicate it. We think I've got to use these big corporate
Exactly.
words because it sounds impressive,
Yeah.
or it's expected because I'm in this environment.
Darren, are your parents still living?
My mum is. Dad passed. Yeah.
And how old is she?
She is 80 next year.
Yeah, so my mom's 94 and she has the attention span for three things.
Yeah.
And if you ask her or tell her anything that isn't in those three things, she has little to no interest. They are crossword puzzles,
Yes.
tennis,
Yeah.
and her soap opera.
Nice.
And will I get her to the dentist? And so I think about like if I can,
Get her to the dentist.
yeah, I
That's the
mean like
fourth one.
if I can explain, she's at this stage she doesn't care much about what is going on and that's fair. She's earned it. But
Mm,
if I have to tell her something about what's going on, I get a sentence before it's like turn up the tennis match, right? So I use in that 5-year-old or 94, they're
yeah.
similar. And I got a 401k email from the plan administrator recently, and there's all these acronyms and fancy terms. And I've told several people this over the years. I don't understand what you're sending me.
Yes.
And they say to me, "Oh, but because it's regulated by the government, I don't understand what you're sending me. I'm paying you to be the translator, and you are making it
Yes.
more difficult for me. Why does it have to be so hard? Can you say
Yes.
press here, give me money here? That's all I need to know. What's the bottom line?" So,
That's it.
yeah, we do love because at some point someone introduced those words to us, and we think we have to use them.
Absolutely. So let's then talk about these shaded habits because
Oh, sure, yeah, I'd love to.
I'd love to understand from your perspective because in my own experience, because I was never a public speaker. In fact, I'm introverted and still am, but I've learnt to do it over the years. But for the most people, when you ask them to do a speech or do a presentation, they'd rather die than stand up in front of a group. And I find
Do you know what they'd rather do more? Do you know what's one more thing they'd rather do less than speak?
what's that?
Listen back to themselves on a
That's right. Yeah. Well, and I'm
Oh
sure
my,
that
that is like I had to do it with a client this morning and I made him listen. We maybe got a minute in before he's like, I can't anymore. No, don't give it to me.
Well, is it worse to listen to your own voice, or is it worse to listen to your own voice and watch yourself on video?
Oh, well, we spend, you and I are looking at each other right now. If we weren't on Zoom, I would probably be walking around,
Yeah,
just moving anyway, because I like to move when I'm thinking and talking. But I'm caring about your nonverbals. If you're not engaged, and where do you go? It's like, but I am, so I'm spending energy looking at you, processing, looking at myself, processing, trying to make sure I'm, don't slouch. It's 7:30 here in Columbus. It's so shaded habit. Let me just tell you what it is. It's a term that I came up with,
yeah,
and it is this. There are things that everyone does that are not great. An a filler word, talking on too long, bad eye contact. Everyone's got something.
yes,
And in a what I call a shaded room, the laboratory, the closed office, the small group conference, the conversation with a peer, nobody really cares.
yeah,
You're like, yeah, yeah, Darren, he does that thing. It's okay. You kind of do the shrug. You go, it's a
yes,
little annoying. But Darren, the minute I take that shaded habit and I throw a light on it in a big boardroom,
mm,
hoarding up in a big conference, on a stage, it gets really loud and distracting. And all of a sudden, people aren't listening to what you're saying. They're counting how many ums you have.
yes,
I can't tell you how many leaders people have called me and said, "Oh, that new leader, I didn't listen to a thing they said." They said, "I just counted how many ums or you knows
yes,
or likes."
yeah,
And so it's a problem because then those important words that you are saying. So, and then add on to the fact that we're only hearing 50% of what people are telling us. Our
mm,
attention spans are completely shattered. Our forgetting curves are very high. And so mix that all together, you don't have room to take those habits and bring them and be illuminated. So
mm,
that part about giving the shrug is because you have a relationship with these people,
mm.
right? The teams have a relationship with each other. I don't want to call you out on that, Darren. You're my friend, you're my boss. I have a lot of social capital with you.
Yeah,
That would be uncomfortable if I told you that the ums were in the way. I'll just let you go. Like we just avoid it. But what we forget is the minute you go to a different audience in a larger space with the spotlight on you, and more importantly, higher stakes,
yes,
that stuff is going to get in the way.
mm,
So it's not a shadow habit. It's shaded, meaning like it's there, kind of like I have some shade coming on me. You can kind of see it, you hear it, but it really gets illuminated in those other bigger, higher stakes spaces. So, and that's the calls that we get are when people are thrust into those higher stakes without the training or knowledge about how to practice out of those habits.
nice. Because I was going to ask you the next obvious question is if
Listen to
it's
yourself.
that's because I'm not reading a script, Ruth. I'm not reading a script.
I would never let I would never let you read a script. I would click off if I knew you're reading a script.
Absolutely, because that is a question I like to ask you around keynotes,
Ooh.
and so I'll make note of that. The question I was going to ask you with the shattered habits, the ums, the ahs, the filler words, the nervousness, the uncertainty, it is a habit, and it's a habit that has probably been formed naturally through various, and there might be different reasons for that.
Yep.
Is there a simple solution to it, or does it take work? And we're not asking from the perspective, is there a blue pill you can take and everything goes away like the Matrix? But I do
Well,
I do know there are people who have either mannerisms or they walk up and down a stage or they stand behind a lectern and for safety or they use those filler words and they just lose their impact. The message is phenomenal, but they lose the impact because of all these, I guess, shaded habits that come into it.
yeah.
How do you work? And I don't want this to sound like a general question. Hey, give me this, give me the one answer, etc., etc. But there's probably a whole host of different answers to
Well,
that.
I will. I have two things that have to happen,
Mm,
regardless of what it is. And I did it this morning actually with the client, and I'll explain. So this is a person who I like to tell stories because people can imagine. This is a person who is at the top of his career. He is on international stages, he travels the world, he has a lot of influence. And I watched him on an interview in a different country. We happen to be old friends, and he's asked me to help him. And he's like, just what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And he's breathing from up here,
Yeah.
and he's getting the ums and the ers just because he doesn't have enough breath to take the pause.
Yeah.
And his stress response is sort of not taken over, but it's starting to drive.
Mm-hmm.
He may be able to tell it where to drive, but it's almost in the driver's seat. I like to say stress responses are always going to be in your car, but we want them in the back seat.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I said, I want to raise your consciousness to two things. And I said, first, so we watched his video. And I said, do you see where you're breathing from up here? It's called stacked breathing.
Yeah.
You don't know how to breathe. And if you learn to breathe, the ums and the ahs would go away because try to say or ah while taking a proper breath. Go ahead. I'll count to three. One, two,
Uh,
three.
it's hard.
Can't. There's a structural thing going on. I won't bore you with the details. It has to do with your glottal stop. And but if I take a breath, I'm replacing the filler word. And I'm giving myself more breath to have a longer sentence that's going to finish down versus up. Hi, my name's Ruth Milligan. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And when I run out of breath, I get really high, right?
The old questioning
Versus,
tonality.
versus, hello, my name's Ruth Milligan.
Yes.
I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And it's really fun to be with you on this podcast. So he says to me at the end of this hour, I've known this guy for 35 years. He said, I've never recognized that I actually was in a stress response, and I've never known that I was breathing wrong. So the first two things, you have to watch yourself and listen
Yeah.
because it is proven, Darren, in hundreds of research studies in psychology on feedback and learning, that Darren, if you listen to yourself speaking, in the process of you watching or listening, you are actually learning something.
Yes.
And I ask you, how did you sound? How did you feel? You will go through that learning process to tell me, what did you learn from watching yourself?
Mm.
And you will get 90% of what I saw correct. And then I get to tuck in the last 10% because I have a trained eye and a trained ear to find something that you wouldn't have normally seen. Maybe the breathing pattern,
Mm.
maybe the pause, maybe that some people try to talk on the upspeak. You can't, you have to, it's a breathe up and down, and then we speak.
Yeah.
The person that tries to speak as they're taking a breath up, or maybe they take, it's all wrong. Like it's just, you're feeling that tension. So, but if I was the first one to tell you what you were doing wrong, I'm doing the learning.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
That sounds like bullshit.
What do you know?
Right.
You've only
And
run TED Talks.
you are you are 100% more likely to want to work on something that you have identified versus me. My job is not to tell you what that is. My job is to get you to listen to yourself.
And recognizing that you probably have the awareness to know anyway, intuitively, but your job is to, I guess, shine a light on that and
And then give
encourage
you
them
the
to take the
tools.
next step. Yeah.
And then the next step is here's the one thing to go work on. And today for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
all we talked about was breathing.
Yeah.
You breathe through your nose, you breathe through your mouth, your diaphragm. How do you breathe? Where do just there's a lot of mechanics. How do you sit?
Yeah.
Tons of mechanics to it. And this is a very, very smart man, and he was blown away. So I think part of we have to sometimes go back to the basics
Yeah.
and the foundations about how the body works with breath,
Mm.
posture. Is our head on the right place? If I start to speak like this from the back of my throat, I'm sure you've had some people who have this is so probably hard for you to hear, but like the kind of froggy vocal fry. I'm speaking from the back of my throat. It's so annoying. So
It is. It
get them
is.
to sit up, bring
Mm.
that sort of posture so I actually have a chance for the breath to come up.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of, I see one thing, but I'm pretty certain that they don't have awareness of it. I've got to get their awareness to it without telling them it. And then I can give them a tool to work out of it.
Yeah,
It's going to take another round or two of watching yourself. We were preparing for these podcasts related to our book, and I did a test podcast and I heard myself say about 10 times. I was mortified. If I can't nail this, who can? And I hope in the first half an hour or however long we've talked, I haven't said once.
I'll have to go back and listen.
You can count. It's natural. Somebody actually said, should I always cut out the ums when I'm editing a podcast, or should I not write ums? And I was like, well, if the person is an ummer, then write the dialogue as an ummer. But in podcasts, if they're distracting, you actually have post-production editing to edit them out.
Totally.
But you also just may want to, like, because you don't want your listeners to. I stop listening to people on podcasts that say too much. I just can't listen.
Well, I was going to ask you, Ruth, whether it's about reducing the numbers of ums and the filler words. So you build awareness to it and build strategies to over time remove it, or whether it's no, you need to remove all of them.
Well, I think what I'm trying to argue for is with the proper breath pattern, they go away.
They go away naturally.
And we have this philosophy. It's one thing for me to tell you to stop doing something.
Yes.
I'd rather tell you to do something
Yes.
and to teach you how to use your body and the stress response, to counter the stress response. Breath
Mm.
counters stress response. Breath gives me a pause to think.
Yes.
Breath gives you, the audience, a chance to catch up on what I've said.
100%.
Breath gives me a break from the filler words. It is such the productive tool.
Yeah.
If I can get you to use it, so much gets solved. And it is like that in every disfluency, every issue we see. If I tell
Mm.
you, say less, I don't know how to say less. Somebody said on a panel the other day, answer this question in 3 sentences. It's like, when did we
Come
talk in
on.
like sentences? Like I was like, I don't know how to think about. So I actually asked my 20-year-old daughter, could you answer a question in 3 sentences? And she said, my name is, she gave me her name. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a student at Ohio State. I mean, maybe it was 20 seconds.
Yeah.
This person went on for 3 or 4 minutes. We don't equate to what those things mean because we don't write like we speak. We don't speak like we write.
Well, that was a question I was going to ask you in relation to that and the breathing part. How much do you find clients or people who are needing to be influential spend so much time on trying to get the words right, the content right, rather than trying to think about what is the message and how do I want
Mm.
the audience to feel? And what I've seen is a lot of people that spend so much time on either writing a speech, writing a message, and trying to remember what to say, that they put so much pressure on them having to remember what to say, they lose sight of the what the real purpose is to get the audience to feel something, to think
Mhm.
something, and ultimately, hopefully, to do something.
Right.
So your
Yeah, we actually, you said it. We actually believe you should always have the audience, you should have a goal. I want them to learn something, feel something, do something.
Mm,
And if I write those out and then I find what's the most I have to share for them to believe what I'm saying is true. I'll say that again. How much information do I have to share for them to believe what I'm saying is true? So, like in that example that I shared about the 401k emails, all they have to tell me is click here and give this money. It could be
yes.
one sentence. And I would believe them because I've paid them as experts. I've written I've signed their contracts. I know what the job is. I don't need 500 words
Mm,
for me to go find because I believe them.
yeah.
What do you want me to do with this information? So, similarly to speaking, do I really need 17 slides to prove to you that this is the cure to cancer? Maybe if you're a scientific audience, or maybe they go in the appendix and I use them for Q&A.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to think about content, and I could spend hours and days on this topic because I think we just don't do enough work in the thinking part.
Mm.
What the audience needs, what your message is, how do you know it enough to be able to be spontaneous, extemporaneous, use improv, read the room, know you're falling asleep. Hey, Darren, wake up. Sorry. I know you're not asleep.
Well, yeah. Well, it is because it's night, nearly 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's
You
all
just
good.
need another cup of coffee. You're good.
That's it. That's
So
it.
I don't know if I answer your question, but I think that and this goes back to habits, that my habit is always to share too much information. Well, at some point you got to check in and give them some story and resonate with them about what this should feel like to you. This
Yeah.
feels like a sunny day. Or, sorry, my update's going to feel like a big freaking thunderstorm. I mean, even one word weather can help somebody know how you want me to feel about it.
Yeah.
But instead, I throw you 17 charts and I go, what do you want me to do with that? What do you...
That's right.
So it's getting out of our own way. We still make things too complicated. I would also argue because knowledge doubles on itself about every 22 minutes now, I'm exaggerating. We have access to so much more information. It does not mean that our audiences want that information.
No. No, it's because often it's like sitting, and I've seen this. You've got people who are making presentations, giving keynote addresses, giving just plethora after plethora of content. You feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose, and the retention rate, because our brains don't have the capacity to remember everything, we walk away and think, well, that was I was just overwhelmed. I don't even know what the whole point of that was.
Exactly.
Which brings me to this point, right? I wanted to ask you this question around conferences, and you would have seen this with TEDx. Now, TEDx is an environment where people are on stage and they're not. I've very rarely, if ever, seen anybody on a TEDx stage stand behind a lectern. But if you go to most conferences, corporate conferences, people tend to stand behind lecterns, and certainly people who are within an organization who are giving a keynote address, might be the head of marketing or head of sales or the CEO or the chairman, tend to stand behind the lectern and quote unquote read a speech. Now, there's no question there, but I think yes, it's putting people to sleep. One of the things that I always say to people that when I'm teaching them how to pitch, how to present, how to speak publicly is to remove the lectern because it's the barrier between them and the audience. The audience is not there to listen to you read a speech, nor are they there to listen to you read words from a PowerPoint slide. Have a conversation. So I'd love your specific take on the people that you work with, whether it be senior executives, teams, government departments, and so forth. How much of it is about not, and I don't sound this disrespectfully, winging it, but knowing the message and knowing how to articulate the message without having to read a speech or remember specifically what to say.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on what you just said. I will try to be brief. The first is somebody that reads an anything is not delivering a talk. They're reading the written word. And I'm saying that very explicitly because the written word is not how we talk.
Yes.
The written word needs to be translated into words that and sound listening for the right for the ear,
Mm,
how people listen. I can tell within 30 seconds if somebody's reading something to me on the phone because their breath pattern is wrong.
yeah.
They're trying to get to the end of the sentence and they can't, there are certain people that are amazing orators in our midst who understand the power of the pause, the short. Right? So that's the first thing is we can tell when you're reading and it's really bad because we're not going to remember much and you haven't done your work. You're being lazy.
Yeah.
Right. Jeff Bezos 10 years ago got rid of the PowerPoint. Are you familiar with this
Yes.
whole? Yeah.
Yeah, but
He
maybe the
used
audience is not, so I love you
so
to share that.
right. So 10 years ago, he realized that PowerPoint, and this is not the conference, but it relates. He realized that PowerPoints in these presentations at Amazon were not successful. People couldn't hear the whole thought.
Mm.
Got interrupted. You didn't get to point four or slide four. There are 3 points. You get interrupted after two. So we got rid of the PowerPoint presentation and replaced it with a 6-page memo. And in some instances, it might be a press release with what you would report on and what you would want the story to look like after you
Mm.
made that investment or made that decision. Thanks to a $5 million investment in our warehouse, we have been able to do these amazing, efficient things. That's really hard to write, even after you've done it, let alone visioning it.
Yeah.
But the memo, the way they do it is they write the memo and they sit down at the meeting, and everyone has 20 minutes of quiet time to read the memo together. No one's expected to read it in advance.
Hmm.
And they do what Crucial Conversations would say is the first step: shared knowledge.
Hmm.
Everyone now has the complete thought. Notes in the margins, questions. Then there's a sequence that they open up for conversation. I'm not as familiar with that part. Bezos has a really great quote about this, which is the PowerPoint is easy on the writer and really hard on the listener. The memo is really hard on the writer and easy on the listener.
Mm.
This goes back to the point you're asking about the podium and the reading. Those people are lazy.
Yes.
They haven't done the work that's required to iterate. They haven't lived through the mess of figuring out what does the audience need? How much time do I have to fit in the most important points? How do I use hierarchy to narrow? How do I bring story to bring emotion? How do I get to the call to action? How do I keep them awake? There's a lot of things that have to get done,
Yeah.
and they just don't care. The notion of the TED Talk has really revolutionized a lot of this because Richard Solwarman said there were 3 or 4 rules. One, there's no podium, there's no notes, you don't have more than 18 minutes, and you can only talk about one idea.
Mm.
Simple.
Love it.
So when you say you have an hour at a cancer congress, with 1,000 oncologists, there's a lot of those are scientific talks, and they want to see the science, and that is a specific genre.
Mm.
But once they leave that congress and go, that talk doesn't make it with the $1 billion pitch for the new cancer center.
Yeah.
So I think my best advice is find a coach who can help you iterate. And that is really the best role we play, quite frankly, is in sitting and listening and helping
Mm.
repeat back what we've heard, helping you shape. Boy, but you said this story to me before, that could fit here, that should go for,
Mm.
sequence. What don't you need?
Yeah.
What's missing? And in that point about like what is the core idea, you want it to be a structured conversation, but most people get a stress response when they speak, which means that they lose track of time. Time expands when you're in stress. You think you have a lot longer than you do. And so you go on longer than you should.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, you haven't gotten to your point because somebody comes and says, "Thanks, Darren, we're good."
I
And you're
haven't
like,
even got to my first point yet.
get to my, because it's the like slow reveal. This is not a fiction book. This is tell me the bottom line up front.
Yeah.
Tell me the 3 things you're going to tell me. Tell me what you told me. Those things still really apply now.
The
They
tell them,
really
tell
do.
them, tell them. Love it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you actually that, well, there's two questions. One, you mentioned before we press record that you're working with some clients that are in situations where they are competing for some large contracts, and we're talking billion-dollar contracts, which is very, very high stakes,
Yes.
where they not only have to pitch, but they have to almost be interviewed, where they don't know what they're going to be confronted with. So I wanted to ask you in relation to that and join that with what sort of ideas do you normally share with people in terms of structure to how to either plan a response, plan a pitch, plan a story? Is there a simple structure that you tend to use as a default for most people, particularly people who perhaps have been guilty of just blah and not having a structure to their presentations or pitches that they can grab hold of and start to build some muscles around?
Yeah. So let me answer the second question first, and then we'll go to the pitch. Well, that'll lead into the pitch. I like to use a very simple three-part question sequence
Hmm.
that helps people. So if somebody comes to us and say, I'm getting ready for a talk. Here's the deck I used at the last talk. And I say in my kindest, most gracious way, that's awesome. Can you just put that just aside for just 1 second? We'll get to it. And then I say, tell me the one idea you want to leave the audience. Only one.
Yeah.
And the process of thinking about what is the one idea, because people can't take on 5 or 6 or 10. And if you haven't come up with that idea yet, then I know you're not going to be able to structure anything. So the second question is, what's the question that the audience wants you to answer? And or what does the audience need from you right now?
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is all in the context of the purpose of this event and the genre that it is and how much time you have and all this sort of boundaries. But if you can't get through the what's the question on the mind of the audience, what's the one thing you want to leave them, aka what's your goal,
Yeah.
and what does your audience need? Because you may have prepared something over the weekend, and on Monday morning, you awake to a tsunami or a shooting, or and your audience needs just care and love and compassion and quiet and reflection. I was actually at a TED conference when Brexit was voted.
Right.
Everyone from the UK sat in a big circle for 4 hours, just like stunned, because these people didn't, they were in the unfortunate category of like, you can't imagine this would happen. And because the lack of imagination, which is part of the problem we're having now, people
Mm.
have lack of imagination that something could blow up or something could be taken away. So, long story short, that's where I always start. And then it's a matter of sorting and grouping and organizing. Okay, so that's the one idea. What does the audience need to believe that? How much information do they need to believe something's true?
Mm.
And then it's a sorting and gathering. I mean, lots of post-it notes, lots of iterations, lots of, you have to have a balance of story and data. And then you go from there. And sometimes they say, okay, I only have 5 minutes. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, let's get all this shit down to what might fit 5 minutes because I used to say in the boxing match of time versus content, time always wins.
Yes.
I don't think that that's wrong, but I've had a colleague tell me that there's a dance between time and content. And if you show up, I had a college president friend of mine try to testify at our state house. He sat for 6 hours waiting to testify for 10 minutes on a bill.
Yes.
While he was sitting there, it went to 8 minutes, went to 5 minutes, and when he finally got up, he might have had three, waited all that day to say 3 minutes. And so his 10 minutes, if he had told us his bottom line at the end, we would have never gotten to it.
That's it.
So if you can't get it out in a sentence, which is what we call sort of bottom line up front,
Mm.
what is the answer to that question?
Mm.
You know, Darren, we're going to have fruits, vegetables, and meat tonight for dinner. Let me tell you about where the fruit was harvested and the vegetables are raised and the meat was slaughtered. And then I'll tell you about the land that they were on. And then I'll tell you about the feed they had. Like you can just keep going down. But if you're given 10 minutes, Darren, we're having fruits, vegetables, and meat for dinner.
Mm.
If you're given 30 minutes, we're having fruits, vegetables, and meat for dinner. You don't add more big points, you add more detail
Yes.
underneath it. And that it really is, I'm foundationally pointing to the book behind me called
Mm.
The Pyramid Principle, which Barbara Minto wrote, which is the structured thinking hierarchy. And that's really what the book teaches. And everybody needs to understand that to get
Mm.
to the right amount of content
Yeah.
for that time and that genre.
Because often people want to fit so much content into a short period of time that they rush through it and they don't use the pauses. Their breathing now starts to get affected. They might make mistakes. They talk too quickly, and the audience is
And
sitting
I'm
there
not going
going,
to follow 10 points.
no. So less is more.
I want you to know one thing, Darren, you're going to be well fed at dinner.
That's it. Done.
There's nothing else that matters. That's my bottom line. That's my goal is I'm not going to tell you every ingredient of every dish. That's
Yes.
tell me the clock's made versus tell me what time it is. So
Yes.
let's address the high stakes pitch and
Yeah.
So in about 2018 or so, we were invited to help a team um, finalize their sort of the short list, right? So they proposed something, and there's 8 companies, and they're shortlisted to 4, and there's only going to pick 3. And because the time before they lost the bid based on one thing, the team had walked in and they looked like they didn't care.
Wow.
That was it. They weren't prepared. They were sloppy. They were like arrogant. They kind of know what's going on. And they had had the bid before, so they didn't think there was anything at risk. So they needed to solve that.
Mm.
And since then, these bids, which happen in a certain category in the government, have become more complex and complicated both. They're sometimes have 10 people in them with 7 different kinds of questions. Sometimes you know the questions in advance. Sometimes you get them when you walk into the room. Sometimes you have the right people in the room, sometimes you don't.
Hmm.
And you are doing a what I call a squat meets a sprint, which is I have to use every muscle in my body and go really fast
Yes.
and hope that they hear you and their scorecard checks off all the right boxes. And it's the best work I can ever do. I love it dearly. I see the best of people's intentions and passions and talents stretch themselves, and they never leave the experience the same person. They're always developing in the moment because they have to tap into new things,
Yeah.
new practices, new habits, getting rid of things, adding things, working together as a team, having each other's back, being conscious or confident to tap someone and say, like you should do to me right now, you're tapped.
I don't know. Keep going.
But that's the it's a complex situation of team members trying to give feedback with a lot of other eyes on them that are giving feedback they may not appreciate how hard this is. And then you add issues like ADD,
Mm.
stress responses, life gets in the way. I was sitting next to a woman who was so smart and was so qualified, and I looked over and she had 1,700 unread emails.
1,700.
And she goes, "Yeah, that's normal." And I like said to myself, boy, this pitch is in 3 weeks. I don't know. Are you going to have brain space? Like, this takes cognitive load.
Yes.
And she's like, no, she's okay. And everyone's like, she'll be okay. And she wasn't okay.
Okay.
And she hadn't done enough reps and really taken it seriously that this was going to, I needed to put that aside and delegate that away. Because in these situations, you can't do your normal job
Mm.
and prepare because you have to do so many reps. And the reps are on the content, on the introductions. There could be protocols you have to review. There could be demos, the look live. Never do a demo live.
No, no. Especially if it's technology connected.
So we have to go produce look lives, right? Things that simulate it to make you feel like it's in the portal, but it's really not. We support an international conference called from the conference. It used to be called R Studio, and now it's called Posit. And they are R is like R and Python are the big data and analytics software languages. And we get about 100 speakers every year for their international conference. And Hadley Wickham, who's the head of one of the head of our studios, and I get on a call at the beginning of these. This is I think, our 5th year. And we say to everybody, no live demos. You got to have a really, really, really good reason. If you're showing me code live, if you're showing me something live, break it down, show me the stuff that really matters. And if
Yes.
you have to show something, put it on a video, do my look live. Like, we're pretty firm about that. And I
Yes.
had a sticker made, like a hazard sticker, and it says hazard live demos ahead. So I'm a believer that's just too big of a risk. And Darren,
Mm.
what we are in most of these situations is risk mitigators. We're trying to help people eliminate all the shit that's going to go wrong and get you knocked down on points and make it less likely for you to win that bid. So at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're looking for signs that say that's not going to go well, that person isn't prepared, the content's too. There's a lot of places to look.
And there's probably, I mean, as you just talked about, there's multiple different areas to focus in to make it the perfect pitch. But if there was one thing that I'm getting from this conversation today in terms of a theme, it is less is more. And that is
Oh,
don't overload your audience with too much content because not only it's going to be difficult for them to retain that and to recall it, but you're probably going to lose their interest really quickly. But make sure your message is succinct and you're asking for what it is that you want them to do.
yes, that and I'm always a believer if you're given 30 minutes, prepare 15.
Yeah.
People say, no, no, but we're supposed to fill the 30. I say, you will, just not in the preparation. Because when you get in the room, and this happened to me recently too, the client shape shifted how the schedule was working between one room and another, and they lost 10 minutes
Hmm.
in their 90 minutes, and they got something else cut off. And and they had the full amount planned, and it's like that was a mistake. You can't
Yeah.
do you. I had a team prepare 25 minutes, and we knew they were given 45, and they fought me on it. I said, please trust me. They came back the next day, they went 44 minutes
Wow.
on what had been planned to be 22. Breathing, transitions, interruptions, technology, handoffs, whatever, going on a little longer. So less is more.
Less is more. Love it.
Can we
Hey,
can we
Ruth.
make one comment about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was gonna ask you for people who wanted to connect with you and learn more about you, but also pick up a copy of the new book, which is coming out, I believe, in May, early May. Is that right?
May 6th.
May 6th, The Motivated Speaker.
Yeah,
I'll grab
we
a
have
copy of it.
we accidentally wrote this book.
Accidentally. How do you accidentally write a book?
We went to ask ourselves, well, let me start over. We went to seek the answer to a question. How could we be better coaches to our speakers? And we came across a woman who had written a book and had authored what are called threshold concepts on learning to write. Now, Darren, if I told you that I was going to go teach you how to cook and cook well, what's
Yeah.
one thing you have to understand in order to be a good cook?
Well, I need to understand like recipes and the
Yep.
process to go through in order to do it in order.
And what else?
I need to know what equipment to use, what
Mhm.
temperature the oven needs to be on.
Right, temperature, how heat works. I like to say
Yep.
my husband puts the chicken on the grill and then he goes and mows the lawn. I love my husband, I do. Our chicken's usually kind of dry. So he cooks, but he can't cook chicken well because he's always afraid of undercooking it. So he just lets it sit there for a long time.
Right, okay.
So she helped us ask the question, what are those things you have to understand in order to be a great speaker?
Yes.
And we spent a year kind of under her tutelage exploring this notion about the threshold concepts. And we came up with six. And so we blogged about them, we put them on our LinkedIn, we talked about them with our clients. And by the time we were done, we're like, wait, we wrote a lot, kind of like you and your articles during
Yeah.
COVID. Right? And then we're like, wait, we actually have like stories beyond stories because we've been doing this for 15 years to tuck in like a Dagwood sandwich. Like there's some lettuce and some tomato and some onion to make this like really come to life and give a lot of flavor. Maybe onions, mustard, whatever. And so the thresholds became a framework for a book to see what are the things you have to do and what are the things you have to understand in order to do something well, and in this case, speaking.
Hmm.
She had done that for writing, and we were very like blown away by her work. She's a writing scholar, and she was there and still is. I text with her almost every day now. Like we've become,
Nice.
and then she got her own book deal with the same publisher to write the trade book for her writing thresholds, which she had only written for academics.
Okay.
So we have sort of a love fest going on, and we realized at the time we were finished, we were like, wait, we got a lot of words. So we put 3 chapters together and sent it to a publisher. And they said to us September 23rd, if you can have this done by November 1st, you have a book deal. Now, I will tell you, Darren, that never happens to anybody. People shop and shop and shop and shop. But three things were on our side. One, the book was nearly done. Two, they needed one more title for their spring lineup. And three, there were three of us.
Mm.
So we were able to share in the work, share in the promotion, share in that, and we were all very motivated. And not one of us felt like it was ever a chore.
Yeah.
And we didn't until like October 1st know that we were writing a book. We just kept writing and putting things together that made sense to us. And so we turned it in November 10th, and now May 6th it comes out, 2020.
Nice.
And it's a
Brilliant.
very accessible book. It has lots of great stories like we've talked about today. It's a breezy read, but it's like a book you're gonna take off your shelf and put back on and make a dog ear and say, "Oh my gosh, I
Yeah,
gotta get."
reference.
And then in the back of it, we have a great list that we didn't find anywhere in a non-textbook of every skill you need to have to actually speak well.
Nice.
So that didn't exist either. That's different than these like understandings, mindsets,
Yeah.
and I'm going to run through them really fast to finish this out.
Please.
The first is speaking is not natural, it's habitual.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen that person is such a great speaker? Such a natural? That's not true. That's a lie. Everyone is born not speaking.
Yes.
The second, speaking is embodied. Back to this person who reads this talk, that's reading the written word. Speaking
Mm.
is embodied. We actually have to put down our thoughts and our written words and actually speak it.
Mm.
There's a point in our coaching where we'll say, it's nice that you're talking about your talk. Let's hear it.
Yes.
It's a frightening moment for most people.
Yeah.
Oh, you want me to hear it? Oh, okay. I guess I can. We're using the breath, we're using the body, we're using eye contact, we're using emotion. That's speaking is embodied. Number three, speaking is messy.
Mm.
And this goes to all of these questions you've been asking about content and how do I structure and how do I get to the right point. It is uncomfortably messy. And to know that there will take iterations, you will not get it right the first time. You have to find places to be recursive and keep learning about what works and what doesn't. Number four, speaking is social. Our audience is making meaning of what we're saying.
Mm.
And what I'm saying is fleeting. Unlike the written word where you can click on it, open up a new browser, open up a new book, can't do that right now.
Absolutely.
Speaking comes, number five, speaking comes in many genres. The pitch is different than the interview, is different than the panel, is different than the podcast. If you try to apply all of those genres with the same preparation, you will fail.
Mm.
And there has to be a really healthy interrogation of what the audience needs in that particular genre, what the boundaries are. When you miss those, you start to see yourself not do as well. When they say it's 5 minutes and you go in with 10 and they're good to their word, and you're like, but I have five more. That's on you. And the last one is what we've discussed a lot was great speaking requires feedback,
Yes.
your own and others.
Mm.
There is positively no way you will do better or get better without using multiple forms of feedback.
Love it.
And that's why we leave with the thing that people want to do even less than public speaking, which is listen to themselves.
That's However, once you start listening to yourself a little bit, you get a sense of, well, yeah, that's just me, and you can get. I feel you get over yourself. So I've done, over 700. This is episode 768. So
Yeah, you're good.
my voice is my voice. It is what it is.
And
I
Darren, I
keep
would
working
leave.
on
I don't know if we're at the end, but this is what I would leave with. Stop making it about yourself.
it. That's all right.
And you just said, I got over myself. Like, if people are really anxious about their speaking, the fact that they're thinking about themselves only makes them more anxious and only makes them less productive in getting to that place that the audience wants to hear them.
Yeah.
Do it for yourself. Stop making it about yourself. Make it about Darren. Hopefully, Darren has felt like this has been a great conversation and Darren's audience feels like it is. Because that was my goal today.
I
Don't make
think
it
you've
about Ruth.
achieved that. No, I think you've achieved that, Ruth, and that's a great way to finish because I often say to teams and leaders in particular who are afraid of making mistakes, not getting the message across. If you're
Mm.
nervous, just think of service. I don't make it about you. It's all about your audience. Just you become the messenger. You still got to know your message, but don't make it about you because you're in your head. So get out of your head and into your heart. So connect. Ruth,
I love that. I love that. Make it about the service. Yeah. It's
yeah,
a checking in. Did
it's just
are you
yeah.
Now you get to go have another cup of coffee and I get to go have dinner. This was really fun. Thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate coming onto the podcast. For people who want to learn more about you and
Oh,
also
yes.
where to get the book, I suggest on your LinkedIn profile, there's your profile photo has a photo of the book coming out in May. So I'm going to preempt that people can connect with you on LinkedIn, as I
Yes.
have just done
Yes.
before we pressed record. Where else can people find out about you, Ruth, and
So
learn more about what you do?
our website, which is linked from LinkedIn, themotivatedspeaker.com is a page, but it directs to our website. So those are ways we love to work with individuals who are in succession, who are in consequential moments on those high stakes. We love to work with teams and we have a few different ways we do that. They're all located on our website. And then we would love to have you buy the book on Amazon, Porchlight for groups at a discount, Barnes and Noble or Bookshop. I don't know if they have Bookshop in Australia, but I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure they have Amazon. And it's a really great read. It's 228 pages, and it's a book you want to have in your hand. I don't think this is a book I would want to read electronically. I want to take notes in the columns. I
mm,
want to dog ear it. I want to be able to use it. And the books that I have here, the ones that are most informative, feel the same to me. Like I go back and I
yeah,
check in on them, and
yeah.
it's a resource. You can pick up a chapter and put it down. So, and
Brilliant.
we would love to engage in conversation. If you love the book and want to learn more, we can do an hour. We have an hour keynote that helps teams understand their shaded habits, and the book sort of becomes a resource to overcome them.
Brilliant.
So there
Awesome.
you go. Thank you.
I'll put all that in the show notes, but I'm gonna get a copy as well because it's out in May. So
Thank
yes, we
you.
do have Amazon. Yeah.
I figured yes. I really do appreciate you and this podcast. I've really enjoyed getting to know a lot of your other guests, and I'm honored to be amongst them.
Brilliant. Ruth, thank you so much for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thank you, Darren. Have a great day.
Thank you. Enjoy your dinner. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.